Okay, so today's session is on how to be grateful for stress. So that's a pretty interesting concept because when we look at stress, we don't necessarily have a great relationship with stress. However, we do know that some stress is good for us and some stress is not so good for us. So what I wanted to do is to explain what stress is and actually what it forms within our system, and then how to be grateful for it and what the benefit of gratitude actually is, because gratitude is a really potent thing. So let's get into it anyway. So when we look at stress can be perceived by many people in many different ways. So just because I'm feeling stressed, it doesn't mean that everyone else is feeling the same stress. So stress is really related to a perception. However, when we are stressed, we have this wonderful hormone called cortisol released, and it comes from the adrenal glands around the kidneys. And whenever we are stressed, cortisol is released. Now, the interesting thing about cortisol is that cortisol decreases your IQ by half within 15 minutes. So we shouldn't necessarily make too many decisions when we're stressed, because they don't necessarily turn out to be the smartest decisions. What it also does is it does increase fatty deposits around our torso area there, and it activates our sympathetic nervous system. Now, cortisol is a really interesting hormone because what cortisol does is it affects our memory, and our memory in an interesting way. So within the brain, our memory is stored or held in a place called the hippocampus. And the hippocampus is an interesting thing because when we look at memory, we have two types of memory. One is implicit memory and one is explicit memory. So implicit memory is old learning and explicit memory is new learning. So normally we can access implicit memory and explicit memory, so old learning and new learning, which is great because that's a nice combination of what I've learnt in the past and also what I've learnt just recently, and then I can put the two together and make a really good decision. However, what happens with cortisol is it bypasses the new learning and it goes straight to the old learning, so the implicit memory. And the reason why that does that is because it comes from a safety and survival mechanism, because the brain or the mind itself is a miser. It doesn't like to use too much energy, so it's trying to conserve energy. And also when we're stressed, what we do need to do is we don't need to think about stuff, we just need to react. So it sort of makes sense that cortisol will actually just go straight to old memory. So what have I done in the past to get me out of this, basically? Or how can I stay safe? Okay, so when we look at changing our relationship with stress and being grateful for it, well, that's an interesting thing. Let's look at gratitude first. Now, gratitude is an interesting concept because gratitude, what it does is, when we seek gratitude, we actually express dopamine. Now, dopamine is a neurochemical that represents joy, salience, meaning, and purpose within our lives. Now, also, when we're grateful, we also express a hormone called DHEA. But DHEA is a really interesting hormone because what it does, it has the ability to give us a sense of well-being. It relaxes us, and it actually increases our IQ, which is really interesting because sort of the opposite of cortisol, where it decreases our IQ. Now, the beautiful thing about DHEA, when we're looking at the memory in the hippocampus, is that it allows us to access implicit memory and explicit memory. So we get the best of both worlds here because we've got old learning and we've also got new learning as well. And so then we're actually making a better decision because our IQ is increased. there's that sense of relaxation, and we've also got this sense of well-being, and we've got joy, meaning, and purpose within the dopamine that's being released. Now you might well say, well, that's all great, Maurice, but how can I actually be grateful for stress? So we can be grateful for stress because there's another thing that I've spoken about, and this is a beautiful phrase to keep in mind, is that discomfort appears in the light of significance. So that means that when we feel discomfort, it actually means because something matters to us. If it didn't matter to us, we wouldn't actually care about something that happened. So the reason why things are creating discomfort is because we're attaching to our values. So when we experience stress, stress is a part of discomfort. And the stress is an indicator for something that we can be grateful for in the way that it is indicating something of value to us. Now, that means that when you experience stress, rather than getting caught up in reacting to it, because we know that when we experience stress and we look at it in a way that this is bad for us, we actually create the cortisol release and all the other bits and pieces that come from it. Okay. However, when we experience stress, we can look at it in a different way, and we can go, wow, this is really interesting. What can I learn from this? Where is the opportunity out of this? And how can I further myself? So those three questions are really important, because what they do is they shift our relationship and our attention in regards to the stress, and rather than becoming overwhelmed and then resigned and potentially blaming self and blaming others, we then start to look at it and go, wow, this is really interesting. What can I learn out of this? So this is an opportunity for me to learn about myself and also to learn about others. So in that way, I'm actually experiencing gratitude for something that I normally wouldn't associate gratitude with. And when I start to experience gratitude with it, then I then get all of the benefits that can then come from it. So I hope that has made sense. This is a really, really interesting concept, and we'll go through this further and further in the sessions that we do together, because when we can start to shift our relationship with things, then we start to see them in a different way, and then we also start to access different neurochemicals, different parts of the brain, and we actually have a different biological response to things as well as a psychological response. Anyway, I hope you got something out of that, guys. And stay tuned, because there'll be some more coming up soon. Thank you.